Marianne Williamson has now been floated in a number of outlets as a potential primary challenger to Biden in 2024. And I've talked about this a number of times already. I love the idea. I'm not going to get into all the reasons now why I love it. Just go check out those previous segments that I did where I explain in detail why I think it's a good idea. She went and spoke to Jordan Chariton on Status Coup. By the way, everybody go subscribe to Jordan Chariton's channel because he gets suppressed by the YouTube algorithm even more than me and this channel. And that says a lot because we get suppressed by the YouTube algorithm. What I want to show you here is a clip. This is Marianne Williamson doing, honestly, what she does best, which is she breaks down the psychological battering of the working class and how we got to this point. Now, I was previously very critical of Marianne Williamson. And actually, I said things that I in retrospect, I regret. In the original run, I was with the chorus of people who was like, this crystal lady woo-woo nonsense. It's silly. No. Marianne is absolutely positively sincere. It's not an act. And she's thought deeply about the psychological aspect of politics, the philosophical aspect of politics, but also the spirituality involved in it. Now, me personally, I'm not a spiritual person. Everybody knows that. But that doesn't mean that there aren't valid lines of inquiry talking about those topics. So here she is talking to Jordan Chariton, and she's going to get into the psychological battering of the working class and the results of that, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Kind of from a psychological level, I've traveled so much, and something I'm seeing more and more, it's not just that we're so polarized. It's also that I think there's so many people, whether it's on the left, right, whatever, that are without leaders and kind of hopeless, for lack of a better word. And it's really creating this vacuum for them to fall into some dark spaces, whether it be conspiratorial, blaming the other. I wanted to ask you, because you've talked a lot about that, and just when people don't have hope, it fosters the conditions for people to go into more dark thinking and rabbit holes.
If you only look at our situation from a material perspective, people have every reason to be depressed. Because if you only look at things in terms of the externalities, it is as bad as people fear. The system is all locked up. But the problem with our politics is that it's only seen things through the filter of externalities. So if you think that that's all there is, then people being disillusioned is not a bad thing. It just means you were under an illusion before that you ever thought it was as simple as that. So on one hand, the fact that people are recognizing what's bad is not of itself a bad thing. Sometimes depression, anxiety, being really sad about something is not dysfunctional. Sometimes it's functional. If you have a broken leg, if you have a broken arm, the brain registers pain, and the brain registers pain for a reason. It's a functional response of the body because the brain is telling you, you need to address this and you need to reset the bone. When conditions are really bad in your life and you feel an upset about it, it's your psyche telling you, you need to address this. We need to we need to change our thinking. We need to reset our thinking just like you reset a bone, and we need to reset our social and economic system. Now, if you think that we have to look to the same people who created this mess to fix it, then of course you feel upset. The people's rage and upset is legitimate. What's illegitimate from a larger perspective is to think that that's all you have. We're not the first generation to be faced with conditions that were seemingly intractable. There was no reason on a rational level to believe that the abolitionists would prevail. All the economic system of the South was against them. Huge economic and political forces were against them. There was no reason for the women's suffragettes to think that the suffrage movement would prevail. Huge economic and political and misogynistic systems were against them. There was no reason rationally for the civil rights movement to believe that they could prevail. But they worked anyway, and ultimately they succeeded. And so much of our public conversation today peripheralizes the tools and the mindset that is most needed at this time in order to prevail, and which former generations knew.
I think that's brilliant. And I think what people are starting to realize now that they perhaps didn't realize in the past, even in the recent past, is that the fight by its very nature is virtuous. The fight by its very nature is an end in and of itself. Because people think about politics in a means to an end kind of way. We have to do these things so that we get to this end goal, which is whatever the end goal may be to create a better society. You fill in the blank with whatever policy pops to your mind. But for the people who've won victories, for the people who were part of these mass movements in American history that got us from point A to point B, they didn't know or even feel like at the time, oh, this is going to work. In retrospect, we look at it and was like, oh, look, it worked. And we tend to put our own current perception, we superimpose it onto them as if they thought every step of the way, well, it was going to work. Of course, we're going to end segregation. That's what's going to happen. We're going to have the Voting Rights Act. We're going to have the Civil Rights Act. It's going to happen in the mid 1960s in that decade. No. If you told somebody in 1957 in Mississippi, hey, this whole system of organization is going to collapse soon, they'd look at you like you're fucking crazy. If you told people in the middle of Prohibition, hey, soon we're going to get rid of Prohibition, they'd be like, what? But the people who won those battles, they were acting out of moral and ethical convictions, not taking no for an answer, not stopping and understanding that the fight is virtuous in and of itself, and the fight is an end in and of itself. Just the act of getting out of bed and going to wage that battle is something that brings meaning and purpose and fulfillment to your life. And that's what Marianne Williamson is touching on right here. When people, and she's right, people feel battered by the system, and that's a rational response. You're supposed to feel that way because you know everything's messed up. That's why you feel that way. So a lot of people think it's an individual problem. It's not an individual problem. Do you have some sort of mental illness or psychological problem, or is it just a problem? Well, when you look at the system, it's very clear. You're not crazy. You're not mentally ill. A lot of people, you guys don't even have psychological problems. You just have problems. You can't pay the bills. You're going bankrupt from a medical bill. You can't get a job. Your job was outsourced. You feel like you're stuck in a rut and you're not climbing any ladder of opportunity. There's no hope. Are these psychological problems? Do you have mental illness that's making you feel terrible? Or is it just a problem? It's a problem and we have to address it. That's not to say there are no psychological problems or mental illness. Of course there are. But a lot of the times in modern society, we have problems that are masquerading as mental illness or psychological problems. And they want to make you feel like it's just an issue with you. Well, what if it's not? What if it's an issue with the broader society? And what you do is you need to channel that anger and those negative emotions into that positive fight. So she goes on to talk about, look, there are different kinds of outrage. There's moral outrage, which is just and noble. But then there's also dysfunctional outrage, which leads to nihilism. The point of the outrage can't just be the criticism. And this is something ContraPoints did a wonderful video on envy a while back, and she talks about resentment politics in that video. And it's a brilliant portion of the video. And basically what she says is, to the people who practice resentment politics, it's not actually about solutions at all, in any way, shape, or form. It's not about materially improving conditions for people right now, however we can. No. The whole point of resentment politics is the critique, is the criticism. And the problems are just a pretext to get the criticism out. We need to turn away from the path of political nihilism and moral nihilism. And we need to turn away from dysfunctional outrage and channel it into moral outrage in the cause of justice. And it's easy for any of us to come out here and talk about the problems nonstop. We do it. Look, I'm not knocking it. That's part of my job, if not the biggest part of my job. But we also need to lean heavily into the solutions and be specific and be clear and be understandable and intuitive so everybody gets it and everybody's willing to take on that battle. So we need to channel all the anger and pain and hurt in a positive direction. And don't use dysfunctional outrage, use moral outrage. And engage in the fight in a way where we can win. However that ends up manifesting. Look, I think Marianne Williamson should run for president. We don't have anything to lose. The left is fractured and factionalized and at each other's throats. And the only way we're going to get to a point where we usher in Medicare for all, free college, abolishing student loan debt, a living wage, the PRO Act, ending the wars, legalizing marijuana, freeing the nonviolent drug offenders. You go down that list. The only way we're going to get to that is if we start fighting and never stop, and also understand the fight in and of itself is what brings purpose and meaning, regardless of the outcome. Fight like we have nothing to lose because we don't have anything to lose. We're at rock bottom. They want to keep you battered and alienated and atomized and alone. They want you to feel like that's all you got, is this hyper-individualistic, dreary existence in a capitalist state. That is not all you got. It's about solidarity and unity and organization. It's about collective bargaining, starting a union, engaging in the negotiations. It's about working together and lobbying on specific issues to specific local governments or state governments. It's about mobilizing for DSA or any other group you want. It's about Marianne Williamson running for president and all of us putting our heart and soul into it. Now, I get it. You know, when Bernie ran and didn't win, a lot of people felt so burned that they just shut down. I get it, man. I'm not passing judgment on you. I'm sympathetic. Those feelings are justifiable and understandable. But it's also exactly what they want you to do. It's also self-disenfranchisement, which serves the establishment better than anything or anybody else. So I'm just going to say no to self-disenfranchisement. I'm going to say no to endless political nihilism and dysfunctional outrage. I'm going to say yes to moral outrage. I'm going to say yes to fighting back as a matter of principle, regardless of what happens. And Marianne Williamson is the only person that fits this role ideally at the moment. It's her moment. She's the voice of the current time. And I've never felt that more strongly than I do right now. And so it's time to take on that fight. It's time to try our best to make the arc of history bend towards justice, like Martin Luther King said it does. So there you have it. Brilliant commentary from Marianne Williamson. Everybody go check out her talk with Jordan Chariton. And it's time to hashtag draft Marianne, because she's the one that this moment is calling for. And I think at this point, it's obvious. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.